The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Naomi opened her eyes. It was her 7th birthday, but something felt different. The unusual silence in the house was unsettling. Normally, by this time, her mother Abina would already be preparing the special breakfast she had promised. Naomi got out of bed, her small bare feet making the wooden floor creak as she walked down the hallway. "Mom? Dad?" she called, her voice echoing in the empty house. In the kitchen, she found a hastily scribbled note. "Emergency at work. We'll be back soon. We love you, sweetie." With a sigh, Naomi made herself a simple breakfast of cereal and got dressed for school. Her blue uniform, a little too big for her, reminded her that she would soon need a new one. As she walked through the dusty streets of her neighborhood, she couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. This wasn't the birthday morning she had imagined. At school, Naomi tried to keep her spirits up. Her classmates sang happy birthday to her, and her teacher, Miss Aqua, gave her a small notebook with flowers on the cover. "For writing your dreams," she said with a warm smile. But as the day progressed, a sense of unease began to grow inside Naomi. When the final bell rang, Naomi patiently waited at the school entrance. Minutes passed, and neither her father Kwame nor her mother showed up. The other children left one by one, some casting curious glances at her, others oblivious to her situation. Soon, she was the only one left, sitting on the steps, hugging her backpack. "Do you want me to call your parents, Naomi?" The principal, Mrs. Mensah, asked, concern in her voice. Her imposing figure cast a shadow over Naomi. Naomi shook her head, her dark curls bouncing. "It's okay. I can walk home. It's not far," she replied, trying to sound brave. Mrs. Mensah hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. "Be careful, sweetie, and happy birthday." With cautious steps, Naomi began her walk home. The streets were busier than usual, the noise of traffic and conversations making her nervous. As she crossed an intersection, her backpack got caught on a post, causing her lunchbox to fall to the ground. Without thinking, Naomi bent down to pick it up. The screech of tires was the last thing she heard before everything went black. David was driving distractedly, his mind replaying the argument he had with his wife Tina that morning. Something about unpaid bills and extra shifts at work. Suddenly, he saw a small figure in the middle of the street. His heart skipped a beat. He slammed on the brakes with all his might, but it was too late. The impact was dull, and for a moment, David was paralyzed, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. Then reality hit him like a cold wave. He got out of the car, trembling, his legs barely supporting him. There, lying on the asphalt, was a small, motionless girl. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" he screamed, running toward her. People began to gather around, some pulling out their phones to call emergency services, others just watching in horror. David knelt beside Naomi, his hands shaking as he checked for signs of life. She was unconscious, a thin trickle of blood running down her forehead, staining her school uniform. Without waiting for the ambulance, he carefully picked her up, surprised by how light she was, and put her in his car. "Move out of the way!" he shouted at the onlookers as he made his way back to his vehicle. With Naomi in the back seat, David drove frantically to the nearest hospital, ignoring traffic lights and speed limits. Meanwhile, Abina was late getting to Naomi's school. The bus had been delayed, and she had forgotten her purse in her rush to leave. Her heart pounded as she ran through the streets, her hijab fluttering behind her. When she finally arrived at the school, the playground was empty, an unsettling silence hanging in the air. "Naomi?" she called, entering the building, her voice echoing through the empty hallways. The principal, Mrs. Mensah, came out of her office, a look of confusion on her face. "Mrs. Abina," she said, her expression puzzled. "Naomi left over an hour ago. She said she would walk home." Abina's heart stopped for a moment, fear taking hold of her. "No, no, no. She never walks home alone." At that moment, her phone rang. It was Kwame. With trembling hands, Abina answered. "Abina, is Naomi with you?" Kwame's voice was tense, worried. "I just got home, and she's not here." Panic gripped them both. Kwame dropped everything and rushed to the school to meet Abina. Together, they started frantically searching the streets, asking everyone they saw if they had seen a little girl in a blue school uniform with dark curls. At the hospital, David anxiously awaited news about Naomi. He paced the waiting room, his shirt stained with the girl's blood, his eyes red and swollen. Tina arrived soon after, forgetting their earlier argument upon seeing her husband's state of distress. "What happened?" she asked, hugging him tightly. Between sobs, David recounted what had happened, his words tumbling out, interrupted by moments of uncontrollable crying. "I don't know who she is, Tina. She had no ID, just her school uniform. What if she doesn't make it?" Tina hugged him tighter, her own tears mingling with his. "Don't think like that. We have to have faith." Hours passed, each minute a torture for David and Tina. Finally, a doctor came to speak with them, his expression serious. "The girl is stable, but her condition is critical," the doctor explained. "She has suffered severe head trauma and needs urgent surgery. We've done all we can here, but she needs to be transferred to a specialized hospital in the neighboring city." David and Tina looked at each other, knowing without words that they couldn't abandon this unknown child. "We'll go with her," they said in unison. As the ambulance prepared for the transfer, David had an idea. Her uniform. Maybe I can use that to find her parents. He ran to his car but was horrified to find the uniform missing. In his haste to get Naomi to the hospital, someone must have taken it from the back seat. Night fell over the city, and Kwame and Abena continued their desperate search. They had walked through every street, every alley, shouting Naomi's name until their voices were hoarse. They went to the police, but were told they had to wait 24 hours to report a missing person. Exhausted and disheartened, they returned home, hoping against hope that Naomi would appear. In their quiet house, Abena collapsed on the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Kwame held her, his own tears mingling with hers. Naomi's birthday present, still unopened, lay on the living room table, a cruel reminder of the joy that had turned into a nightmare. "It's my fault," Abena whispered, her voice broken by sobs. "If I hadn't forgotten my purse, if I had arrived on time." Kwame held her tighter, trying to console her despite his own despair. "It's no one's fault, my love. We'll find her. She has to be somewhere." Meanwhile, in the hospital in the neighboring city, Naomi lay in a pediatric ICU bed, connected to machines that monitored every heartbeat, every breath. Her small body looked even more fragile, surrounded by tubes and wires. David and Tina took turns sitting by her side, holding her tiny hand, praying for a miracle. "Who are you, little one?" Tina whispered, gently stroking Naomi's hair. "Your parents must be looking for you desperately." The next morning, Kwame went to the police station to officially file a missing person report. The officer who attended him, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, listened attentively as Kwame described Naomi. Her curly hair, her bright amber eyes, the small scar on her chin from when she learned to ride a bike. "We'll do everything we can to find her," the officer assured. But Kwame could see the doubt in his eyes. He knew that every minute that passed reduced the chances of finding Naomi safe and sound. Abena, unable to stay home waiting, decided to walk the streets again. She carried pictures of Naomi, showing them to everyone she met. Some looked at her with compassion, others with indifference, but no one had any information. With each negative response, Abena felt a part of her heart tearing apart. At the hospital, David couldn't shake the idea of the missing uniform from his mind. It was their only clue to finding Naomi's parents. He decided to return to the city where the accident happened, hoping to find some lead. "I'll be back soon," he promised Tina, kissing her softly before leaving. "Take care of her." Tina nodded, squeezing his hand. "Be careful," she whispered, watching her husband walk down the hospital corridor. David drove back to the city, his mind replaying every detail of that fateful day. The traffic, the blinding sun, the small figure in the street. When he arrived at the accident scene, he stopped and got out of the car. Traffic flowed normally, with no sign of the tragedy that had occurred there just a day before. As he walked along the sidewalk, carefully observing every detail, something caught his eye. In a nearby alley, he saw a piece of blue fabric sticking out of a trash bin. With a racing heart, he approached and pulled it out. It was Naomi's uniform, stained with blood, but recognizable. With renewed hope, David took the uniform to the nearest school. The secretary, an older woman with half-moon glasses, recognized it immediately. "It's our school's uniform," she confirmed, her eyes widening in surprise. "Can I ask why you have it?" David briefly explained the situation, and the secretary paled. "Wait here," she said, running to the principal's office. Minutes later, the principal came out, tears in her eyes. "It's Naomi. We've been looking for her. Her parents are devastated." Quickly, the principal called Kwame and Abena. The news hit them like lightning. Their daughter was alive but severely injured in a hospital in another city. Without wasting a second, Kwame and Abena set off. The journey felt endless, each kilometer a torture of anticipation and fear. Abena prayed silently, her lips moving without making a sound, while Kwame drove with determination, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. They finally arrived at the hospital. Tina met them at the entrance to the ICU, recognizing them immediately by the desperation in their eyes. "She's here," she said softly, guiding them to Naomi's room. "She's been stable, but she hasn't woken up yet." Seeing their daughter, small and fragile in the hospital bed, Abena let out a heartbreaking sob. Kwame held her, both approaching the bed slowly, as if fearing Naomi might disappear if they moved too fast. "Naomi, my love," Abena whispered, taking her daughter's hand. "We're here. Mom and Dad are here." As if she had heard her mother's voice, Naomi's eyelids began to flutter. Slowly, her eyes opened, focusing on the familiar faces around her. "Mom, Dad," she murmured weakly, her voice barely audible over the beeping of the machines. The room filled with tears of joy and relief. David and Tina watched from the doorway, their own eyes wet with emotion at this reunion. The following days were a slow but steady recovery for Naomi. Kwame and Abena never left her side, grateful for every small progress. David and Tina visited regularly, forming an unbreakable bond between the two families. Naomi had to undergo physical and occupational therapy, relearning tasks she once took for granted. Each small achievement was celebrated. The day she could hold a spoon by herself, the first time she walked again after the accident, the first time she wrote her name again. Kwame and Abena were there at every moment, encouraging her, drying her tears of frustration, and celebrating each victory. David and Tina became frequent visitors, bringing books to read to Naomi and games to entertain her during the long hospital hours. Often David would find himself staring at Naomi, his heart heavy with guilt, but also filled with awe at the little girl's resilience. One afternoon, while Naomi was sleeping, Abena found David alone in the waiting room, his head in his hands. "David," she said softly, sitting next to him, "I need you to know something." David looked up, his eyes red from holding back tears. "What happened was an accident," Abena continued, taking his hands in hers. "Yes, we almost lost Naomi, but you also saved her. If you hadn't brought her to the hospital so quickly, if you hadn't stayed to find her parents, I don't even want to think about what could have happened." Abena's words were like a balm for David's tormented soul. For the first time since the accident, he felt like he could breathe fully. Finally, the day came when Naomi could return home. As they packed her things in the hospital, Abena couldn't help but hug Tina. "We can never thank you enough for taking care of our daughter," she said through tears. Tina smiled, returning the hug. "You would have done the same. We are family now." The trip back home was quiet, Naomi dozing in the back seat between her parents. When they arrived at their street, they were surprised to see all their neighbors waiting, with "Welcome Home" Naomi signs and balloons decorating the houses. Mrs. Mensah, the school principal, stepped forward with a bouquet of flowers. "Welcome back, Naomi," she said with a warm smile. "We've missed you so much." That night, as Naomi slept safely in her own bed, Kwame and Abena sat in the living room, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. "We almost lost her," Abena whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Kwame held her tightly. "But we didn't. She's here, with us, and now we have an even bigger family." In the following months, life slowly returned to normal, though with some changes. Naomi returned to school, now accompanied by her parents every day. Her classmates welcomed her with hugs and drawings, and Miss Aqua made sure Naomi had all the support she needed to catch up with her studies. David and Tina became frequent visitors to Kwame and Abina's home. Weekends often found them sharing meals, laughing, and creating new memories together. Naomi loved these moments, especially when David took her for walks in the park, pushing her wheelchair on days she felt too tired to walk. A year after the accident, the two families gathered to celebrate Naomi's 8th birthday. The house was filled with balloons, laughter, and the aroma of jollof rice, Naomi's favorite dish, freshly prepared by Abina. Naomi, dressed in a beautiful new dress, beamed as she blew out the candles on her cake. Her eyes shone with wisdom beyond her years, a reminder of all she had overcome. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Kwame said, his voice filled with emotion. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, then blew out the candles with all her might. Everyone applauded and cheered. "What did you wish for?" Tina asked curiously. Naomi smiled mysteriously. "I can't say, or it won't come true. But," she added, looking at everyone present, "I think it has already come true for the most part." Later that night, when the party was over and Naomi was sound asleep, the two couples sat in the backyard, enjoying the quiet, starry night. "You know," David said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never believed in miracles before all this." Kwame nodded, understanding perfectly. "Sometimes miracles come disguised as tragedies," he reflected. "And sometimes," Abena added, taking Tina's hand, "they bring gifts we never expected." Tina smiled, squeezing Abena's hand. Like a bigger family. The four sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The soft chirping of crickets and the occasional barking of a distant dog were the only sounds breaking the stillness of the night. "Do you think Naomi will be okay?" Tina finally asked, voicing the worry they all shared. Kwame looked towards Naomi's bedroom window. "She has her challenges ahead," he said slowly. "But she also has something many children don't have. 2 families who love her unconditionally." Abina nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And that makes all the difference." In the years that followed, Naomi grew into a strong and compassionate young woman. The accident had left scars, both physical and emotional, but it had also given her a unique perspective on life. She developed a passion for helping other children who had gone through traumatic experiences, and was often found volunteering at the local hospital. David, inspired by Naomi's recovery, decided to change careers and became an occupational therapist, dedicating his life to helping others overcome injuries and disabilities. Tina, on the other hand, got involved in road safety campaigns, sharing Naomi's story to raise awareness about the importance of safe driving. Kwame and Abina, strengthened by the experience, became pillars of their community, offering support to other families in crisis. Their home became a refuge for those in need of a shoulder to cry on or a willing ear to listen, and Naomi, at the center of it all, continued to be the bond that united these two families. Each year on her birthday, they all gathered to celebrate not just her life, but the incredible journey they had shared. On her 18th birthday, Naomi stood before her extended family, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. 10 years ago, she began, an accident changed our lives forever. It could have been the end of my story, but instead, it was just the beginning. Thanks to all of you, I learned that love can heal the deepest wounds, that family is not just defined by blood, and that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. She looked at her parents, at David and Tina, and at everyone else who had been part of her journey. I wouldn't change anything that happened, because it brought me all of you. And that, she said with a radiant smile, is the greatest gift I could have ever wished for. As Naomi spoke, everyone present felt the weight of her words. They had gone through so much together, had overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and had emerged stronger and more united than ever. And so, on a warm summer night, surrounded by love and laughter, Naomi blew out the candles on her cake once more. But this time, she didn't need to make a wish. Everything she had ever wished for was right there, in that room, in the smiling faces of the people she loved. This story reminds us that life is precious and that the bonds we form can arise from the most unexpected circumstances. It teaches us that love, compassion, and resilience can transform even the most difficult situations into opportunities for growth and connection. If Naomi's story and her family have touched you, don't hesitate to share it with your loved ones. Sometimes, stories have the power to touch hearts and change perspectives. Would you like to be part of more inspiring stories like this? Leave a like, subscribe to our channel to not miss future narrations that will make you laugh, cry, and reflect. And don't forget to leave us a comment. Have you experienced any events that have unexpectedly changed your life? How has it helped you grow and see the world differently?